Hi, my name's Amy, and today I'm going to talk to you about the IEP process. At the heart of the IEP process is a law known as the Individual with Disabilities Act, otherwise known as IDEA. This is really important for parents to understand because this law guarantees their child free, appropriate public education, services provided through the school at no cost to the parent, as well as the evaluation process, again, at no cost to the parents themselves. Let's dive into this whole topic a little more. So first off, an IEP, I'm going to talk about it and use the acronym, is an individualized education plan that schools write to help your child succeed and be successful in the classroom. So this process may begin because you notice or your student's teacher notices that they're having problems in class. So the first step in many schools is going to be known as RTI. So this is going to be intervention that's given. It could be a small group instruction, an individualized instruction, or modification such as moving your student's desk to the front of the room. If those work, then that's great, and they'll continue receiving those services. However, for some students, that's not going to be enough. So that's the second step of the IEP process, and that's going to be the referral step. So the referral is when a formal request is made, either by you or by the school, to evaluate a student for special education. As a parent, you have to give your consent for an evaluation to occur. This means that if you don't want your child evaluated, you have the right to refuse it. If you have given your consent, the school is going to schedule a meeting, and this is called a domain meeting or an eligibility or an assessment plan. And during this meeting, the school is going to talk about how they're going to assess your child, who's going to be involved, what tests are going to be given, and any information and answer any questions you may have about the evaluation itself. Some people that you might see at that meeting would be the principal, a school psychologist, and your student's general education or regular classroom teacher. Some tests that might be conducted include intelligence tests, observing the student in class, or gathering student work. Once you have said you're okay with the evaluation, the school will have 60 days to complete all of the assessment that they need to. This assessment is going to be individualized. That means if you have a physical disability, you may have a physical therapist as part of your evaluation team. If you have a speech problem, you might have a speech therapist as part of your evaluation. So it's really going to look at your individual student and what help they need in the areas they are struggling. So this will be done. You're going to be called back to the school. And the next step is going to be what they call an eligibility meeting. So this is where the school looks at all the information they've gathered, and they say either, yes, your student is eligible for an IEP, or nope, they don't qualify. So what turns a no into a yes from the school? Well, that's really going to be a few things. First off, they need to have one of 12 disabilities covered under IDEA. So this would be something such as an intellectual disability or a physical disability. They have to have one of those. And then the final thing is it has to affect their school performance negatively. If it doesn't affect their academic performance, it doesn't mean they won't get help. It doesn't mean they won't get services. It just means they won't get those services through an IEP. So you're at this meeting, the team has talked, and they've said, yes, your student is eligible for special education services. So what's the next part? Well, the next part is the special education teacher is going to be involved in writing a specific plan for your child that's going to help them to have academic success. The school has 30 days to write this plan, and they'll call you back for a meeting. 3 days prior to the meeting, they're going to give you a copy of the IEP that they're proposing so you can review it, look it over, and any questions you may have, jot them down and take them to the meeting. And then at this meeting, you're going to give your approval to implement the plan that the school came up with. Again, this does not happen unless you give your consent. So let's say you go to the meeting and you don't like the plan, or you don't agree with everything or some of the goals. As a parent, you need to let your voice be heard, because if you are not comfortable with the plan, then it will not be implemented without your consent. So you now have a plan in place. How do they make sure the plan's working? That's done through different progress monitoring. The first is going to be quarterly progress monitoring. And during this special education teacher is going to look at what your students' goals were. Are they close to meeting them, or do those goals need to be adjusted? If they need to be adjusted, then they'll ask for your consent to modify the goals accordingly. Again, if you don't want the goals changed, you don't have to change them. They cannot change them unless you give your okay. And then on a yearly basis, the IEP is going to be reviewed by the whole team. New goals, any changes, anything any team members feel need to be discussed will be discussed during this meeting, and the IEP will be updated. Every 3 years, a student's eligibility is going to be determined. So basically, they'll look through and ask the same questions they did when the IEP was originally written to say, is this student still eligible? If the student is, then a new IEP is going to be collected, and often there may be some new assessments done. There may be some assessments that aren't done every 3 years. Again, it's individualized, so it will really depend on your student and what they need. Now, you've heard me say IEP a lot, but you may not know what is in the IEP. So first off, there's going to be some narrative information. This is going to be information about your student. They're going to have annual goals in there. These will be what your student is working towards accomplishing during the year. And along with those goals, there may be some more short-term objectives or benchmarks the students meet that will help them reach that overall goal. Goals can be educational, physical, social, or behavioral. Again, this is an individualized plan, so what goals are listed are going to be based on what your student needs. Along with that, you're going to see something that talks about the special education or related services that they may receive. For example, if they have speech, it's going to say how frequently they're going to meet with a speech therapist, where they're going to meet with the speech therapist, and how much time they'll spend in speech per week, per month, really, again, depending upon what your student needs. The other component you're going to see is if there are times where your students will not be in the general education classroom, that's going to be listed. If your school gives state or district-wide tests and they'll have any accommodations such as questions read to them during the test, or they won't be taking those tests and be tested through an alternative method, that information again will all be included in the IEP. As students age, the IEP I like to think of as sort of a living, breathing document, which means the IEP is going to change based on what your student needs. Eventually, students are not going to be in the school system. At 22, the students no longer receive services through the school. They may receive services through the Department of Rehabilitation, or other social organizations. And because of that, the IEP, as they get to be a certain age, are going to list what their goals after age 22 are, and any services or things that they need to accomplish or supports that they will need to fulfill those goals. And then the year before they age out of the system, then it's also an acknowledgement that the student itself understands what their rights are. As I share, the IEP process can be a really overwhelming thing, and there's lots of steps. It can also be an emotionally hard time as a parent because you are concerned and want the best for your child. So during this process, there's a few things to remember. One, your participation, while not required, is really helpful to make sure the plan put in place is the right plan for your child. Be sure to ask questions, advocate for important changes and positive changes that you think need to be in there, and make sure you understand what the school's proposing, what the goals are, and any questions or any things you may not understand, you need to make sure you do before leaving. The second thing is nothing can happen without your consent. So if you don't feel something is right, don't be afraid to refuse services or say no if you do not think it is in your child's best interest. You are in the driver's seat. And finally, even when an IEP is put in place, you can request a meeting or changes at any time you want. Make sure you have your voice and you use that voice to hopefully provide your student with the best things and all the resources they need. The IEP process is lengthy and can take 90 days from the initial referral. If they do intervention services, that could add even more time to the process. I wish you luck and thank you for listening. Good luck on your IEP journey.